I never thought I'd be the guy who loses everything. But here I am. No house, no savings, no wife. Just a suitcase and a handful of people I can still call friends. It's been 2 months since my life imploded. I'm writing this from the spare bedroom of my buddy Sam's house, because I have nowhere else to go. And even now, I still can't believe how it all went down. How my wife, Claire, the woman I loved for 12 years, tore apart my life in the worst way imaginable. And the kicker? She didn't just betray me with one person. First, it was my younger brother. Then, it was my best friend. It was a Wednesday, the kind of day that blends into the background of life. I had just come home from work, tired but looking forward to dinner with Claire, my wife of 12 years. We weren't in a perfect place, who was after over a decade together. But I thought we were solid. The first thing I noticed when I pulled into the driveway was the garbage bags. 3 of them, lined up neatly on the front lawn. My stomach sank. I stepped out of the car, staring at the bags, trying to piece together what I was seeing. They were my bags, my clothes, my shoes, even my running gear spilling out of one of them. "Claire," I called, my voice shaky. She stood on the porch, arms crossed, her face expressionless. She wasn't the woman I'd woken up next to that morning. She was someone else entirely. "You can't stay here anymore," she said, her voice cold and detached. "What are you talking about?" I asked, walking toward her. She didn't flinch, didn't move. Instead, she tossed an envelope at me. It landed on the porch between us, a stark white against the wood. "I filed for divorce," she said. "You need to leave." I stared at her, then at the envelope, disbelief coursing through me. "Claire," I said, my voice breaking. "What the hell is this? What's going on?" She crossed her arms tighter, her expression hard. "You heard me. I want you out of the house. Now!" I bent down and picked up the envelope, my hands trembling as I opened it. Divorce papers stared back at me, her signature already scrawled at the bottom. "Claire," I said again, desperate for any shred of explanation. "Why? Why are you doing this?" But she didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked back into the house, slamming the door behind her. I stood there on the porch, my world crashing down around me. I tried calling her later that night, sitting in my car with my bags piled in the back seat. The calls went straight to voicemail. I texted her, begging for her to talk to me, but my messages went unanswered. For hours, I sat there, staring at the house I'd poured my heart into. The house we'd turned into a home together. I thought about the dinners we'd shared in the kitchen, the movie nights in the living room, the mornings spent chasing each other around the house like kids. Now it was all gone. I spent that night in the car, parked a block away, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened. The next morning, I woke up to the first piece of the puzzle. The morning after being kicked out, I felt like a zombie. My head throbbed, my eyes burned, and my chest felt hollow. I parked outside a coffee shop, trying to pull myself together. Scrolling through my phone, I opened Instagram to distract myself. That's when I saw it. The photo that shattered the last remnants of my denial. It was Claire, my younger brother, Tyler, at a bar. She was leaning into him, her hand resting on his knee. He had his arm draped casually over the back of her chair, his body angled toward hers. The caption read, "Late night drinks with my favorite people, Red Heart." My blood turned to ice. I hadn't seen Tyler in months. He'd been distant, skipping family gatherings and avoiding my calls. Now I knew why. I stared at the photo, my heart pounding, every nerve in my body screaming in disbelief. How long had this been going on? I drove to Tyler's apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. By the time I arrived, I was shaking, not just from anger, but from the betrayal cutting through me like a blade. Tyler opened the door, his face shifting from surprise to guilt the moment he saw me. "Ethan," he said, his voice hesitant. "What are you doing here?" I shoved past him, stepping into the apartment. "Are you sleeping with Claire?" I demanded, my voice sharp and unsteady. His face paled. "Ethan, it's not what you think. Don't lie to me," I shouted, my anger spilling over. "I saw the photo, Tyler. I saw how close you two were. Just tell me the truth." He looked away, guilt etched across his face. "It happened once," he admitted quietly. "It didn't mean anything." My knees felt weak as I stared at him. "Once," I repeated bitterly. "And that's supposed to make it better? You're my brother, Tyler. How could you do this to me?" He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't want to hear it. "You're a coward," I spat. "You couldn't even look me in the eye while you stabbed me in the back." "Ethan, I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "It was a mistake. I don't know why I let it happen." I shook my head, my chest heaving. "You don't know? You're my brother, Tyler. You were supposed to have my back, not sleep with my wife." He didn't try to stop me as I stormed out of the apartment. Driving away, I felt like my world was collapsing. It wasn't just Claire who had betrayed me. It was Tyler, my own flesh and blood. I couldn't go back to the car after leaving Tyler's apartment. The weight of the betrayal from both Claire and my brother was too much to bear. I found myself walking aimlessly through the streets, my thoughts a storm of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Every time I replayed Tyler's confession in my head, it felt like another stab to the heart. It happened once. That's all he could say. Like it was an accident, like it wasn't a calculated decision to cross a line you can't come back from. I needed to confront Claire. When I got to the house I was no longer welcome in, I pounded on the door, not caring if the neighbors saw. She didn't answer. I called her phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Finally, the door opened, but it wasn't Claire standing there. It was her best friend, Emily. "What are you doing here, Ethan?" she asked, her tone laced with pity. "I need to talk to Claire," I said, my voice shaking. "She's not here," Emily replied, stepping outside and closing the door behind her. "Then where is she?" Emily hesitated, glancing away. "You should leave, Ethan. This isn't going to help." Her evasiveness only fueled my anger. "You knew, didn't you?" I said. "About her and Tyler?" Emily's eyes widened, and for a split second, I saw the truth in her expression. She knew. She had known all along. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "but you need to let this go." Her words were like gasoline on a fire. "Let it go," I said, my voice rising. "She cheated on me with my brother, and you want me to just let it go?" Emily stepped back, her face pale. "This isn't the place for this," she said. "Please, Ethan, just leave." I stared at her, my fists clenched, before turning and walking away. I had nothing left to say. Later that night, I sat in Sam's guest room, staring at the divorce papers Claire had thrown at me. Every word felt like a slap in the face. She was demanding everything: our house, the majority of our savings, even spousal support. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a text from Tyler. "Ethan, please let me explain. I know I messed up, but I want to make things right. Please call me." I threw the phone across the room, watching as it bounced off the wall and landed on the floor. I didn't want to hear his excuses. The next morning, I woke up to another message, this time from Claire. "We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow at the park. Noon. No epaledi. No explanation. Just a demand." I didn't reply. By the time noon rolled around the next day, I wasn't sure why I'd even shown up. Part of me wanted to yell at her, to demand answers. Another part of me just wanted to hear her admit the truth. When I got to the park, she was already there, sitting on a bench with her arms crossed. She looked like she hadn't slept, but there was no trace of guilt on her face, just annoyance. "Thanks for coming," she said, as if she'd done me a favor. "Why did you want to meet?" I asked, my voice cold. She sighed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I just wanted to make sure you understood that this isn't working anymore, Ethan. It hasn't been for a long time." I stared at her, my chest tightening. "So that's your excuse? Things weren't working, so you decided to sleep with my brother?" Her jaw tightened. "It wasn't like that." "Then how was it, Claire?" I snapped. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you threw away everything we had for some cheap thrill." Her eyes flickered with something, anger, maybe, or regret, but she didn't respond. "You didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth," I said, my voice shaking. "You just kicked me out like I was some stranger." Claire stood, her arms still crossed. "I'm not going to argue with you, Ethan. We're done. Just sign the papers." And with that, she walked away, leaving me alone on the bench, feeling more broken than ever. After the meeting with Claire, I felt like I was unraveling. My entire life had been flipped upside down, and every time I thought I couldn't feel more broken, something new reminded me of what I'd lost. I spent most days crashing at Sam's house, trying to make sense of the mess Claire had left me in. He had been a rock for me during all of this, always willing to listen, never judging me for my anger or tears. But that comfort wouldn't last. One evening, as I was nursing a beer and scrolling aimlessly through my phone, Sam walked into the room with a cautious expression. "Ethan, we need to talk," he said, sitting across from me. I frowned, setting down the bottle. "What's up?" He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's about Claire." Hearing her name was like a slap to the face. "What about her?" I asked, my tone sharp. Sam looked at me, guilt written all over his face. She came to see me a few weeks ago." "What?" He held up his hands defensively. "It wasn't like that. She said she wanted advice about the divorce, about how to handle things with you." My chest tightened, anger bubbling to the surface. "And you didn't think to tell me?" "I didn't think it mattered," Sam said quickly. "I didn't want to make things worse for you." I stared at him, my mind racing. Sam was my best friend, someone I'd trusted with everything. The idea of him being in contact with Claire, even if it was innocent, felt like another betrayal. "Did she tell you about Tyler?" I asked. Sam's expression darkened. "Yeah, she mentioned it." "And you still agreed to help her?" "It wasn't about helping her, Ethan," Sam said. "It was about making sure she didn't screw you over even more." I wanted to believe him, but something about his tone didn't sit right with me. A week later, I found out the truth. I was sitting in Sam's living room when his phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a text. "Claire, can we talk tonight?" My blood ran cold. Sam walked into the room just as I picked up the phone, my hand shaking. "What's this?" I asked, holding up the screen. His face drained of color. "Ethan, it's not what you think. Don't you dare," I said, standing. "Are you seriously still talking to her?" "She's been reaching out to me," Sam said, his voice desperate. "I didn't want to tell you because I knew it would hurt you." "Hurt me?" I shouted, my chest heaving. "You're my best friend, Sam. You're supposed to have my back, not hers." "It's not like that," he insisted. "Nothing happened, I swear." "Then why are you sneaking around?" I demanded. "Why couldn't you just tell me?" Sam opened his mouth to respond, but the guilt in his eyes said it all. I threw the phone onto the couch and grabbed my jacket. "Ethan, wait!" Sam called after me. But I was already out the door, my mind a whirlwind of rage and pain. I drove aimlessly for hours, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Claire had taken everything from me. My home, my stability, my brother. And now she was driving a wedge between me and my best friend. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had no one left. That night, I parked my car on a quiet street and stared out the windshield, trying to process the chaos my life had become. Claire had turned my brother against me, destroyed my marriage, and now she was working her poison into the one friendship I thought I could rely on. I felt untethered, like my entire identity had been stripped away. Who was I without my family? Without my home? Without the people I thought would always have my back? I ended up sleeping in my car, too ashamed to go back to Sam's. The idea of confronting him again, of hearing more lies, was unbearable. The next morning, I woke up with a stiff neck and a pounding headache. My phone buzzed with a notification, a text from Sam. "Ethan, please come back. We need to talk." I ignored it. For the next few days, I stayed in a cheap motel, using the last of my savings to pay for the room. The walls were thin, and the constant hum of the air conditioner did little to drown out the noise of the world outside. It was a far cry from the life I'd known, but at least it was quiet. I spent most of my time replaying everything in my head, trying to pinpoint the moment it had all gone wrong. Was it my fault? Had I been too focused on work, too blind to see the cracks in my marriage? Or had Claire been looking for a way out all along? The questions were endless, and the answers felt just out of reach. One evening, I got a call from Rebecca, Claire's cousin. We hadn't spoken in years, but the moment I saw her name on the screen, I answered. "Ethan," she said, her voice urgent. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" I asked, sitting up in bed. "It's about Claire," she said. "I know you're going through hell right now, and I don't want to make it worse, but I can't keep this to myself." My stomach twisted. "Just say it, Rebecca." There was a pause, and then she said, "She's been seeing Sam. For months." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the bed, trying to steady myself. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Ethan," Rebecca said. "But yes." I didn't realize it until recently, and I thought maybe it wasn't my place to say anything, but you deserve to know. I thanked her, though the words felt hollow, and hung up. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. Claire and Sam, my wife and my best friend. Suddenly, every interaction between them over the past year seemed suspicious. The way she'd laugh at his jokes a little too hard. The way he'd glance at her when he thought no one was looking. It had been right in front of me the whole time, and I'd been too blind to see it. Armed with Rebecca's revelation, I felt a cold fury I hadn't experienced before. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. Claire hadn't only destroyed our marriage. She'd taken the few remaining pieces of my life and crushed them underfoot. I left the motel without a plan, driving straight to Sam's house. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind replaying every lie he had told me, every time he had pretended to be my friend while sneaking behind my back. When I arrived, I didn't bother knocking. I pounded on the door until Sam opened it, his face pale when he saw me. "Ethan," he started, holding up his hands like he was bracing for a fight. "Don't," I snapped, stepping inside. "I know everything, Sam. I know about you and Claire." His mouth opened, but no words came out. That brief moment of silence was all the confirmation I needed. "How long?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. "How long have you been sleeping with my wife?" "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said finally, his voice low. It got out of hand." "Out of hand?" I repeated, incredulous. "You're my best friend, Sam. You're supposed to have my back, not stab me in it. How could you do this to me?" He ran a hand through his hair, avoiding my gaze. "I don't have an excuse," he admitted. "It was a mistake. A huge mistake. I am sorry, Ethan." "Sorry," I said, my voice rising. "You think sorry fixes this? You destroyed everything, Sam. My marriage, our friendship, everything." He tried to respond, but I couldn't hear anymore. My chest was heaving, and my vision blurred with rage. "You're just like her," I said, my voice filled with bitterness. "You don't care about anyone but yourself." Before he could say anything else, I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I didn't go far. I sat in my car outside Sam's house, staring at the steering wheel as a wave of emotions crashed over me. Anger, pain, humiliation. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that I had no one left to turn to. Claire had taken my brother, and now she had taken Sam too. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt truly alone. The next day, I decided I needed answers from Claire. Not the half-truths or deflections she'd given me before. Real answers. I called her and told her we needed to meet. To my surprise, she agreed without hesitation. We met at a small diner, the kind of place we used to go to when we were first dating. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat across from the woman who had torn my life apart. Claire looked tired, her face drawn and pale. For a moment, I wondered if she felt any remorse for what she'd done. "Why?" I asked, cutting straight to the point. "Why would you do this to me? To us?" She sighed, looking down at her coffee. "It wasn't about you, Ethan," she said quietly. "I was unhappy. I felt stuck. Unhappy," I repeated bitterly. "So your solution was to sleep with my brother and then my best friend?" Her jaw tightened, but she didn't deny it. "I know I hurt you," she said. "But I wasn't happy for a long time, and I didn't know how to fix it." "You could have talked to me," I said, my voice breaking. "You could have tried to fix things instead of running to them." "I tried," she said, her voice rising slightly. "But you were always so focused on work, on everything but me." Her words stung, but they didn't justify what she'd done. "This isn't my fault," I said firmly. "Whatever problems we had, I gestured between us, is on you. You made those choices, Claire, not me." She looked away, her eyes glistening with tears. "I know," she said softly. "And I'm sorry." Her apology felt hollow, but it was all she had to offer. Claire's apology hung in the air between us, meaningless and weightless. For a moment, I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman sitting across from me with the woman I thought I had married. "Do you even regret it?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Or are you just sorry you got caught?" She flinched, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. "Of course, I regret it," she said softly. "But I can't undo what's happened, Ethan. I can't change the choices I made." Her words should have been comforting, an acknowledgement of her guilt. But they only deepened my frustration. She wasn't fighting for us. She wasn't even trying to salvage the wreckage she created. Was it worth it? I asked bitterly. Throwing away everything we had for a fling with my brother and my best friend? Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel sympathy. I was too tired, too drained to offer her any kindness. It wasn't about them, she said after a long pause. It was about me. I felt invisible, Ethan. Like I didn't matter anymore. Her words hit me like a slap. Invisible, I said, my voice rising. I worked myself to the bone to give you the life you wanted, Claire. A house, stability, everything, and you felt invisible. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. You gave me everything, but I felt like I wasn't enough for you. Her confession was raw, but it only left me more confused. I had tried to be everything for her, to be the provider, the partner, the man she could depend on. And still, it wasn't enough. I stood, unable to sit there any longer. You didn't just hurt me, Claire, I said, my voice trembling with anger. You destroyed my trust. You destroyed us. I hope it was worth it. She didn't stop me as I walked out of the diner. The next few days were a blur of emotions. I bounced between anger and despair, between wanting revenge and wanting to disappear entirely. One night, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled across another photo that made my stomach turn. It was Claire and Tyler, taken just a few weeks before she filed for divorce. They were at a family barbecue, sitting close together with matching smiles. Looking at the photo, I felt a mix of rage and disbelief. She had been carrying on with Tyler right under my nose, all while pretending to be the loving wife. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I called her, my hands shaking as I gripped the phone. She answered on the second ring. Ethan? Why Tyler? I demanded, skipping any pleasantries. Why him? Was it just to hurt me? Or was there actually something there? She was silent for a long moment. I didn't plan for it to happen, she said finally. It just did. That's not an answer, I snapped. You don't just accidentally sleep with someone, Claire. Especially not your husband's brother. I don't know what you want me to say, she said, her voice breaking. It wasn't about hurting you. It was about feeling something, anything. Tyler was there when I needed someone, and I let it happen. Her words only deepened the wound. And Sam? I asked, my voice dripping with bitterness. Was he just your backup plan? Sam was different, she admitted quietly. He actually listened to me. He made me feel seen. Her honesty cut deeper than any lie she could have told. Do you even care about what you've done to me? I asked. Or are you too busy justifying it to yourself? I care, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I can't change the past, Ethan. I can only try to move forward. Her words were hollow, and they offered no comfort. That night, I lay awake in the dark, wondering if I would ever feel whole again. After that call, I decided I needed space, real space. Staying at Sam's was no longer an option, and even the thought of seeing him again made my skin crawl. I moved back into the motel, draining what little was left of my savings to keep a roof over my head. It wasn't much, but at least it was mine. The days stretched on, each one bleeding into the next. I spent most of my time job hunting, trying to distract myself from the pain. But no matter how hard I tried to move forward, the weight of everything Claire had done kept pulling me back. One night I got a text from Tyler. Ethan, I need to talk to you. Please. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening with anger. The audacity of him reaching out after everything he'd done was almost laughable. But a part of me, small but undeniable, wanted answers. I called him, my hand trembling as I held the phone to my ear. Ethan, he said, his voice heavy with guilt. Thank you for calling. Get to the point, I said coldly. What do you want? I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, he began, but I need you to know how sorry I am. What I did, it was wrong, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I let his words hang in the air for a moment before responding. You regret it? I said bitterly. Do you regret it because you hurt me? Or because Claire tossed you aside? His silence was answer enough. I trusted you, I said, my voice breaking. You're my brother, Tyler. We were supposed to have each other's backs. And you? I stopped, unable to finish the sentence. I was stupid, he said, his voice trembling. I don't know what I thought, but I never wanted to hurt you, Ethan. I swear. Then why did you do it? I demanded. I don't have a good answer, he admitted. I let my feelings get the better of me, and I betrayed you. I'll never forgive myself for that. His words sounded sincere, but they did little to ease the ache in my chest. I don't care if you forgive yourself, I said, because I never will. And with that, I hung up. The next day, Claire called. I need to talk to you, she said, her tone firm. It's about the divorce. I agreed to meet her, more out of obligation than anything else. We met at the same diner as before, but this time, the atmosphere was even colder. She slid a folder across the table, her expression unreadable. "What's this?" I asked, opening it. "The updated terms," she said. "I'm not asking for spousal support anymore." "You still here?" Surprised. "Why the change of heart?" She looked down at her coffee. "Because it's the least I can do after everything I put you through." Her admission caught me off guard. For the first time, it felt like she was taking responsibility for her actions. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you," I said honestly. "I don't expect you to," she replied. "But I hope, someday, you can find peace. You deserve that much." Her words lingered in my mind long after I left the diner. After my meeting with Claire, I tried to move forward, but her words stayed with me. For the first time, it felt like she was acknowledging the full scope of the damage she had caused, not just to me, but to herself as well. I wanted to believe her, to accept that she was finally taking responsibility, but the wounds were still too fresh. And then, just when I thought the worst was over, another truth came to light, one that shattered what little progress I had made. It started with a phone call from Rebecca, Claire's cousin. "Ethan," she said, her voice hesitant, "I don't know if I should be telling you this, but I think you deserve to know." "What is it?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "It's about Sam," she said. "And Claire." My grip on the phone tightened. "What about them?" Rebecca hesitated. "They've been seeing each other for longer than you think. Claire confided in me a few months ago, but I didn't realize how serious it was until now. I thought you should know." Her words were like a punch to the gut. "Are you saying they were together before she filed for divorce?" "Yes," Rebecca admitted. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I should have said something sooner." I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing. The revelation hit me harder than I expected. Claire's betrayal with Tyler had been devastating, but this felt calculated, premeditated. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had orchestrated an escape plan, using Sam as her safety net. I couldn't sit with the anger any longer. I needed answers. I drove to Sam's house, my thoughts a whirlwind of rage and disbelief. When I arrived, I didn't bother knocking. I pounded on the door until he opened it, his face pale when he saw me. "Ethan," he began, his voice cautious. "Save it," I snapped, stepping inside. "I know about you and Claire. I know it didn't just start after the divorce." Sam's expression crumbled, guilt written all over his face. "Who told you?" "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice trembling. "What matters is that you lied to me. You pretended to be my friend while you were sleeping with my wife." He tried to speak, but I cut him off. "How long?" I demanded. "How long were you sneaking around behind my back?" 6 months, he admitted quietly. "It started 6 months ago." I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. 6 months? I repeated bitterly. "You've been lying to me for half a year, and you think I'm supposed to just accept that?" "I didn't want it to happen," he said, his voice desperate. "It just got out of control." "Out of control?" I said, my voice rising. "You don't accidentally sleep with your best friend's wife, Sam. You made a choice. Both of you did." He had no response. I turned to leave, but then a thought stopped me in my tracks. "Did you know about Tyler?" I asked, my voice cold. Sam's silence was answer enough. "You knew," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "You knew she slept with my brother, and you still went after her? What the hell is wrong with you?" "I thought she was done with him," Sam said weakly. I thought we had something real." I stared at him, disgusted. "You deserve each other," I said, slamming the door behind me as I left. Driving away, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Claire and Sam had built their relationship on lies and betrayal. Whatever future they thought they had would eventually collapse under the weight of what they'd done. But that didn't make the pain any easier to bear. After confronting Sam, I drove aimlessly through the city, my thoughts a tangled mess. The betrayal felt insurmountable, layer upon layer of deceit from the two people I had trusted most. Claire and Sam had taken everything from me. My home, my sense of stability, my belief in the bonds I thought were unbreakable. For days, I kept to myself, shutting out the world. Calls from Rebecca, even a few from Tyler, went unanswered. I couldn't stomach the idea of hearing more apologies or explanations. The motel room became my prison, a cocoon of solitude where I replayed every moment of the past year. Every lie Claire had told, every joke Sam had made, every instance where their betrayal had been right in front of me. The anger simmered beneath the surface, a constant companion that refused to leave. One evening, there was a knock at the door. I froze, my heart pounding. I wasn't expecting anyone, and the thought of seeing Claire or Sam standing on the other side made my stomach churn. When I opened the door, it was neither of them. It was Rebecca. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, still too stunned to speak. She walked in, glancing around the small, dingy room with a frown. "This is where you've been staying?" she asked, her tone tinged with disbelief. "It's all I can afford," I said flatly, sitting on the edge of the bed. Rebecca sighed, pulling a chair closer to me. "I know you don't want to hear this, but Claire and Sam aren't going to last." I raised an eyebrow. "And how is that supposed to help me?" "It's not," she admitted. "But I thought you should know. Sam's already starting to regret everything. He's been talking to my brother, saying he feels like he made a mistake. His only mistake," I said bitterly, "was thinking I'd ever forgive him." Rebecca nodded, her expression somber. "You don't have to forgive him, but you do have to figure out what comes next." After Rebecca left, her words stayed with me. What had come next? I had no job, no home, no savings. Claire's divorce terms had left me with almost nothing, and the thought of starting over felt overwhelming. But as much as I wanted to give in to despair, I couldn't. Not for Claire, not for Sam, not for anyone who had doubted my strength. I decided it was time to take back control. The next day I started making calls. First to a lawyer, to review the divorce settlement and see if there was any way to challenge the terms. Then to a former colleague, asking about job openings. Each call felt like a small step forward, a sliver of hope cutting through the darkness. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As I worked to rebuild my life, the fog of despair began to lift, even if only slightly. The lawyer I contacted gave me some hope. "The settlement Claire proposed is heavily one-sided," he said. "If we can prove there's been infidelity, and it sounds like we can, it could change the terms significantly." Hearing that was like a lifeline. For months, I'd felt powerless, but now there was a chance to fight back, to take back something of what I had lost. I handed over every piece of evidence I had: Rebecca's testimony about Sam, the photos of Claire and Tyler, and my own account of the timeline. The lawyer promised to file a motion to revisit the settlement. It wasn't revenge I wanted, it was fairness. Meanwhile, I threw myself into job applications, calling on contacts I hadn't spoken to in years. At first, the rejection stung, but eventually, persistence paid off. A former colleague, Eric, reached out with an offer. "We need someone to manage operations at our new branch," he said. "It's not glamorous, but it's steady work, and you'd be a good fit." It was a smaller role than I was used to, but I jumped at the opportunity. Having a job again, something to focus on beyond the mess Claire had created, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. One afternoon, while I was packing up to leave the motel, I got a call from Rebecca. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Sam and Claire, they broke up." The words sent a rush of conflicting emotions through me. "When?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Last night," Rebecca said. "Apparently, they had a huge fight. Sam found out Claire's been talking to Tyler again." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Of course she has." "Ethan, I know this doesn't fix anything," Rebecca said. "But I thought you'd want to know." "Thanks," I said. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper. I wasn't surprised by the news. It was only a matter of time before Claire's tangled web of lies collapsed. But knowing she and Sam had fallen apart didn't bring me the satisfaction I thought it would. If anything, it just reinforced how much destruction she'd left in her wake. As I moved into a small rental apartment, I promised myself one thing. I wouldn't let Claire or Sam or Tyler define the rest of my life. They had taken so much from me, but they wouldn't take my future. Moving into the small apartment felt like a milestone, however modest. It was nothing like the home Claire and I had built together, but it was mine. A place where I could start over without the ghosts of betrayal looming around every corner. The first night there, I unpacked the few belongings I had salvaged, mostly clothes, some personal items, and a single photo album I hadn't been able to leave behind. I sat on the worn couch, flipping through the pages of the album. It was filled with pictures from happier times, vacations, family gatherings, lazy Sunday mornings. Looking at the smiles on our faces, it was hard to believe how far we had fallen. Part of me wanted to rip the pages out, to erase the memories of a life that no longer existed. But another part of me clung to them, as if preserving those moments might somehow keep the pain from consuming me completely. The next week, I got a call from my lawyer. "We've filed the motion," he said. "Claire's team has been notified. If they're smart, they'll agree to renegotiate without a fight." Hearing that gave me a sense of vindication. I couldn't undo what had happened, but at least I could stand up for myself, take back some of what I had lost. A few days later, I ran into Tyler. It happened at a coffee shop near my new apartment. I was standing in line when I saw him walk in, his head down, his posture hunched. For a moment, I considered leaving before he noticed me, but something inside me refused to run. He spotted me and froze, guilt flashing across his face. "Ethan," he said hesitantly, walking over. "Hey." I stared at him, my jaw tightening. "What do you want, Tyler?" "I didn't know you lived around here," he said, his voice awkward. I'm glad I ran into you. I wanted to say I'm sorry again." "You already did," I said coldly. "Doesn't change anything." "I know," he said, his voice breaking slightly. I miss you, man. You're my brother, and I hate that I screwed everything up." The sincerity in his voice gave me pause, but it wasn't enough to erase the betrayal. "You didn't just screw things up," I said, my voice low. "You destroyed our relationship, Tyler. Do you even understand what you did?" He looked down, nodding slowly. "I think about it every day," he said. "I wish I could take it back, but I can't. All I could do is say I'm sorry and hope, someday, you can forgive me." I stared at him, a mix of anger and sadness swirling inside me. "I don't know if I can," I said honestly. "Maybe someday, but not now." He nodded, his shoulders sagging. "I get it. I'll leave you alone." As he walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. I wasn't ready to forgive him, but at least I had said my piece. That night, I sat in my apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayals, the lies, the pain. It was all still there, but for the first time, it felt like something I could eventually move past. The weeks that followed brought a strange mix of progress and unresolved pain. The job at Eric's company gave me a reason to get out of bed each morning, a small sense of purpose amidst the chaos. I was good at what I did, and throwing myself into work kept my mind off Claire, Tyler, and Sam. The legal battle over the divorce settlement dragged on, though. Claire's lawyer initially pushed back against renegotiating, but as my lawyer presented the evidence of infidelity, their resistance began to crumble. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my lawyer called with an update. "Claire has agreed to a new settlement," he said. "She's giving up the house and returning a portion of the savings." Hearing that was a bittersweet victory. The house no longer felt like home, but knowing she wouldn't get to keep everything she had taken from me brought a measure of satisfaction. Not long after, I received an unexpected text from Sam. "Can we talk? I owe you an explanation." I stared at the message for a long time, torn between curiosity and fury. Part of me wanted to ignore him, to let him wallow in the mess he had created. But another part of me wanted answers. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him. We met at a neutral location, a park neither of us frequented. Sam looked rough, his usually confident demeanor replaced with a defeated slump. "Thanks for meeting me," he said quietly, sitting on the bench beside me. "Get to the point," I said coldly. He nodded, rubbing his hands together nervously. "I know I can't undo what I've done, Ethan, but I need you to understand. I didn't plan for any of this. I didn't wake up one day and decide to betray you. Does that make it better?" I asked, my voice sharp. "No," he admitted, "but I need you to know that I hate myself for what I did. I ruined everything. Our friendship, your marriage, my own integrity. And for what? Claire and I didn't last. She went back to Tyler, and I was left with nothing." The mention of Tyler made my chest tighten, but I kept my composure. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you were my best friend," he said, his voice breaking. "And I don't want this to be the last thing you remember about me." I stared at him, my emotions swirling. "I trusted you, Sam," I said finally. "You were like family to me, and you threw it all away for someone who didn't care about either of us." "I know," he said, tears brimming in his eyes. "And I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I stood, unwilling to sit there any longer. "Regret doesn't fix anything, Sam. Maybe one day I'll be able to forgive you, but not today." As I walked away, I felt a small sense of relief. I had said what I needed to say, and now I could finally start letting go. That night, I sat in my apartment thinking about everything that had happened. Claire's betrayal had shattered my life, but it had also forced me to confront truths about myself, about the kind of life I wanted and the kind of people I deserved to have in it. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. With the divorce settled and my confrontation with Sam behind me, the fog that had clouded my mind for months finally began to lift. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could focus on rebuilding, on figuring out who I was without Claire, without the life I thought I'd have. The job at Eric's company became more than just a paycheck. It became a lifeline. Each task, each small victory at work helped me feel like I was regaining control of my life. I threw myself into the role, earning the respect of my colleagues, and even securing a promotion within a few months. It wasn't the career I had envisioned, but it was steady, and it gave me the stability I so desperately needed. One evening, I got a call from Rebecca. "Hey, Ethan," she said, her voice warm. "How's the new place?" "It's good," I replied, surprised by how much I meant it. "Small, but it works." "I'm glad to hear that," she said. "Listen, I know this is random, but I wanted to check in. How are you really?" Her question caught me off guard. For so long, I had been focused on survival, finding a place to live, securing a job, getting through the legal mess, that I hadn't stopped to think about how I was actually feeling. "I'm getting there," I said after a pause. "It's been rough, but I'm figuring it out." Rebecca hesitated, then said, "You deserve to be happy, Ethan. Don't let what Claire and Sam did define the rest of your life." Her words stayed with me long after the call ended. A week later, I decided to take a step I'd been avoiding, returning to the house. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but I needed to retrieve the rest of my belongings before Claire finalized her move. When I arrived, the house felt eerily empty. The furniture was still there, but the warmth, the feeling of home, was gone. I walked through the rooms, picking up a few items I had left behind: a set of tools, some old photo frames, a stack of books. In the bedroom, I found a box tucked away in the closet. Inside were a few keepsakes Claire and I had collected over the years: movie ticket stubs, postcards from vacations, little trinkets that once meant something. I sat on the floor, sifting through the items. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt acceptance. Claire had been a part of my life for over a decade. We had shared good times, built memories, and even though she had destroyed our marriage, I couldn't deny the love that had once existed. I decided to take the box with me, not as a reminder of the pain, but as a symbol of the lessons I had learned. That night, back in my apartment, I opened a bottle of wine and toasted to myself. "To new beginnings," I said aloud, smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. Months passed, and with each day, the weight of the past grew lighter. The scars Claire, Tyler, and Sam had left behind didn't vanish, but they stopped defining me. I stopped replaying the betrayals in my mind, stopped wondering what I could have done differently. I started focusing on the future, on building a life I could be proud of. The job at Eric's company flourished, and I began to feel confident in my abilities again. I made new connections, even started making friends at work, something I hadn't done in years. One of those friends, Anna, quickly became someone I looked forward to seeing every day. She was kind, funny, and easy to talk to, everything I hadn't realized I needed. We started getting coffee after work, just as friends at first. But over time, those conversations grew deeper, more personal. She didn't pry into my past, and I didn't feel the need to dump all my baggage on her. Instead, we focused on the present, on the small joys that had become so important to me. One evening, after dinner at a small Italian restaurant, Anna walked me to my car. "I'm glad we did this," she said, smiling. "Me too," I replied, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She hesitated, then said, "You're different from anyone I've ever met, Ethan. I think you've been through a lot, but you're still standing. That says something." Her words stayed with me long after she left. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. I thought about everything I had been through, the betrayals, the heartbreak, the loss, and realized something important. I wasn't defined by those moments. I was defined by how I had chosen to move forward. I wasn't the same man I had been a year ago, and that was okay. The person I was becoming felt stronger, more resilient. Claire, and I finalized the divorce shortly after that. She kept her distance, and so did I. There was no grand confrontation, no dramatic reconciliation, just paperwork and signatures, a quiet end to a loud chapter of my life. Tyler and Sam faded into the background, distant figures in a life I no longer lived. Looking back, I realized something important. Life isn't about avoiding pain. It's about learning how to grow from it. I had been broken, but I wasn't destroyed. To anyone reading this who's been through something similar, how do you rebuild after betrayal? Have you ever forgiven someone who hurt you deeply? Or do some wounds cut too deep? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.